Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is Jonas Reports for the 20th of July. Well, we had talked about this as we saw the magenta dipping below yellow. We had the ABM yellow right here. And we can put that value up there. Was around the 43.36 range. Below that, obviously, looking for more short activity within the setup here as we were seeing weakness, both in the DOC, where you have midterm buyers, long-term buyers in the red and green falling along with short-term buyers. So there just wasn't any buying interest at that particular stage. And as I was pointing out on the Skype chat, once we get to the 76%, I was looking for a move down to that around 42.45 range, which was around the 76%, which is exactly what we got. We got follow through on it, and even before the 50, we saw some buying interest start returning towards the end of the day, and that was pretty strong and is continuing even now. You can see we're already seeing the beginnings of white MBI dipping down. If that had crossed above magenta, then we would expect much stronger. Now, of course, the day's not over. That can change. But so far, fueling it back up, of course, now the 76% is going to be the resistance on the upside back at 42.98 range. So keep an eye on that. But short-term buyers is all that's really holding this up. We've already got a dip below the red line here. So soft. But the volatility range that we had talked about growing after the second week in July certainly taking place. I mean, that was the most significant move we've had in quite some time. I mean, going all the way back into May. It's still modest. I mean, nothing to get hyperbolic about. From an NQ standpoint, much stronger, staying above at 76%. Then even getting close to that 61 like the S&P. And so this just lets you know this is a tech-heavy support for the market at this particular stage. Should any of that change, and I think most of this was a result of what was Apple's move, because it's so heavily weighted in the index, and that throws things off disproportionately. So bad day for, some of the tech stocks can certainly impact the overall index in a broad sense. From a gold standpoint, didn't really have much of an impact, which is unusual because usually in a more broad sell-off, you usually get a little more traction into that gold space. But again, this is that continued debate on inflation, whether the Fed's just going to continue to either flood money in or you're actually seeing balancing of economic activity, which I don't think is actually the case. And that's kind of told here by the euro. And of course, Europe keeps going backwards. I mean, you see even in London and that, you've got protests and stuff because they're talking about doing additional lockdowns for no real value. And much of Europe is still scarred. I think it's more of a mental thing than an actual real situation. There are no hospitals with any large number of cases or anything like that, but you're going to hear this fear talk about other variants and stuff like that. I think it's intended to keep things under control. What's not under control, and well, actually, which I think is very in control, Bitcoin dipping below that 30K level. This is something that we talked about all the way back at the 60,000+ range when we first started to get our sell signals from the decline here, and our expectation, even after we dipped all these different levels, was a return back to the lows that took place right around 28.8. That's exactly what we're seeing right now, and that was because of this positive extreme setup that literally goes between all of these levels. I mean, you have obviously that 28.830. And then even the 29.8, which is literally right where we just dipped below. So just filling in those positive extremes before. And it does set up the potential if we continue to see weakness and with that MBI white riding over. Still looks like the lows will break. So important to note, and very clean from a 60-minute chart as well. So all those, now that's not to say that it can't turn around and that, and obviously we look for those situations, but very predictable. And that's actually a good thing because the more predictability you get out of these because at least cryptocurrencies moving into futures markets actually becomes a stabilizing force. It doesn't mean they're not high beta. It just means that you have greater control both from a shorting standpoint as brokerages get into that space. This was that whole idea that novice investors, when they got all excited when Goldman stepped into the Bitcoin space and cryptocurrencies, and they thought, oh, that meant that there was only going to be buying, but they don't understand that it just allowed them to hold on to coins to be able to lease out to short from a future standpoint. So again, novices, fun, and of course Ethereum or Ether as they like to call it, just doing what we expected as well. Get back to the lows with that MBI white riding above. Showing a little bit more strength, though, at this particular stage here. We're going to turn around at both blue, red on the MBI, but still very weak from the DSC standpoint. No orange reset or anything like that. So any pop is going to be short-lived, and of course, that's still an ugly shakeout reading. So I would expect it to break into new lows as well, and not surprising. It just fits what we've been expecting from within that space. So intraday on the 5K, kind of fun. You're probably going to see a deviation in my PNT2 chart versus yours as I go through and we start to isolate some of these individual setups as they are and take them from where you get a positive signal but within weakness, and particularly this when we're under the 23%. I've always been a big fan of at least having a close above the 23% before taking that long setup. This orange candle, not so exciting, but you did have green above, and it's just one of those where you've got to go with that potential, but clearly it didn't take long for the white to pop out above. And when that happens and you're below, the 50%, you tend to get a move that goes right back down to the 0%. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And still would have been net positive, but just a tiny move. A little tougher one here would be this MBI white setup here, where you actually had the potentials for a decent setup with the orange spiking, and that you had the dip of orange underneath red. You had the green rising, but literally the next bar, you get the DOC rejection of steel and cyan, and also the white MBI moving above, and of course it was an immediate flip straight down to the 0. And then likewise, this will probably get eliminated because of going through and adding in that feature of when you're below 38%, you have the white leading and magenta below 20 level. That's still negative, and so in the updated language that I have, this will get eliminated, and we will start to have a better read on exactly which ones have the greater potential. This one was actually pretty decent and held quite a bit back and forth, but again, the problem was no steel reset, at least within the last 5 to 8 bars, dipping towards the 0 level. In fact, that doesn't take place until we actually started to get the rally points later in the day, but fantastic volume. I mean, we were looking at large breadth, whereas the previous Friday that really didn't have the same kind of volume to support it. So this one was under much heavier volume, which makes it far more reliable from a reading standpoint. And again, we kept getting the same configuration where you would get the potential for a start of a buy. Of course, when you're already spiked above, the 45 level here with magenta, and then the white appears, it can follow through within that. But you already had green underneath, and they started to roll over negative to the shakeout, and that becomes a significant one. The difference between shakeouts that are negative and moving negative versus where you have positive, and so that's a parsing that adding that language in as we speak as well, and that will further define where some of these setups take us, so that we just have fewer of the false readings, and some of them aren't false in the sense that they'll start out still make their move, but you get your warning signs when that pops above. So then it's just a matter of waiting for a significant setup. In this particular case, we actually had the full reset here where the steel dips to I think it got to 170, 107, anything under 1.2 to me is what I would consider a full reset, and then it was just a matter of waiting for it to get that momentum of magenta back above, and that literally starts right here, and that's where this takes off from, and eventually leads to a move up to the 100% level, where we kind of went across. I'll just slide forward there. We hung up for a while, and then we started to break down with the magentas dropping below, held up for another bar or two, but then did the exact same thing, and that literally led to the move all the way back down to the zero as the white remained well above it. And same thing here. Decent buy configuration, but then the weight overtakes it, expectation back down to the zero, and so on and so forth. And I think it just kept repeating that until we got towards the end of the day. We had this clean ride, huge white move above, and then we literally started to capture the DOC green riding over, and of course magenta, cyan candle coming in, which is cyan under red on the DOC, and that's always in that buy territory. Still fluctuated a little bit with that white pop above, but negated by the fact that you had the green riding over the red, and then sure enough, just took off, and that was that end of day buying. This pushed all the way through. Now, a lot of it under positive extremes, starting with right in this range around the 36 area, and then secondarily a little higher at 40, and which is consistent because you're looking at where this would be from a daily standpoint, right around that 76%, and these have all been. So, in fact, I just might as well mark those because that's definitely horizontal one. That's going to be a retrace factor going forward. So starting right at about there, and then all of these that have built on through. A portion of them have already been filled with this step down and then moved back up towards the highs. So just a matter of playing that one back and forth, but definitely exciting and right on track with what we were looking for to happen right as it did. So whether you're getting 80, 90 points to the downside and then another 40 so back up and continuing with that, that's that kind of volatility that we were talking about, and then it's indicative of the rollover that we've been talking about leading up for the last actually couple weeks, as we've been seeing slight changes in those readings. I mean, still relatively positive overall, but with that greater swing capability is what we were noting. So it's done exactly that. As always, though, I'll keep updating the Skype chat, keep you informed, trade well. We'll talk to you later.